Greetings, Starfighters. We have come to the end of Season 6, the final movie, the bonus bite, as this DVD calls it, Alligator Alley. Not a shark movie. I didn't know this was going to be a thing, because, when I bought it off the Mill Creek site, it did say that there would be a bonus 7th bite, while the title says, Shark Bait, 6 killer shark films. I figured the 7th would be another shark movie. And it didn't say what the bonus film was on the site. That might have changed since I ordered it. I ordered it like middle of last year or so. But yeah. Not entirely sure how I should handle it when it comes to the rankings at the end of the season for the season wrap-up episode. But, another concern I have here, reading the little plot summary on the back of the DVD, and granted these things aren't always accurate. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. The vampire movie season was really bad in that regard. But, basically this looks like this movie's just going to be Lake Placid with a Hatfield and McCoy subplot shoehorned in. A Hatfield and McCoy type subplot shoehorned in, not literally the Hatfields and McCoys. But, this concerns me because I actually really like Lake Placid, so a rip-off of it is probably not going to be great for my mood right now, because we are still in a heat wave, and the last movie, I'm still thinking about how terrible the last movie was, and I watched that like over a week ago from when I'm recording this, and then just work stuff, family stuff, all sorts of stuff, political stuff, because, me, I literally won my first political argument when I was 6 years old. But, yeah, Alligator Alley, let's just get through this and get to the wrap-up, because, man, this has not been a great season. Ghost Shark was okay.
Alright, so I have now watched Alligator Alley, aka Ragin' Cajun Redneck Gators. Silly, but accurate. Anyway, plot summary courtesy of IMDb. When a young woman comes home from college to her family, mutated alligators start attacking her kin and the rivaling family in the bayou. They must overcome their feuds and fight together against the Redneck Gators. Another movie with an alternate title, and another movie that shares its title with an earlier movie. That Alligator Alley was from 2000. Some of the posters I'm using here might be for that one. Google Images is actually not very helpful on that front. If I am, well, what can you do? As expected, we have a similar opening sequence to a bunch of the other movies this season. Is there some mandate at Sci-Fi Channel that says all their killer animal movies have to open with generic music over long shots of nature? Our story properly begins with a couple of characters fishing, and that's about all I can tell you about them, because their accents are really thick and these Mill Creek sets don't come with closed captioning. While they're doing this, a guy with an equally hard-to-understand accent is dumping blue liquid into the water because it was a bad batch of something, but it's the same color as the stuff one of the guys who sound like a bad improv group trying to ape Jeff Foxworthy is drinking out of a jar. Are the alligators going to mutate because of bad alcohol? That's kind of stupid even by this subgenre standards. We do get our first kill less than 3 minutes in. I think this could be a record for this set, but I'd have to go back and look at the other movies to check, and I don't want to. The other guy falls into the water, presumably eaten too, though we don't see it, and the guy dumping the blue liquid doesn't hear them screaming because he put his headphones on. We cut to a different guy driving a different truck, with our lead character, the young woman from the plot description, in the passenger seat. We do learn later that she knows him, but in the moment it seems like she hitchhiked, and he's eyeing her up like a piece of meat. Not that he's a total gentleman or anything. In a few minutes after this, when she's met up with her father, he's like commenting on her appearance right in front of him. earning himself a smack to the chest the first time he does it, but that doesn't stop him. Speaking of her father, who I believe is played by the grandfather from Santa Jaws, they have such different accents that it stretches credulity a little bit that she's only been away from this town for 4 years. Oh, her name is Avery, by the way. And her actress's name? Jordan Danger. What a name, huh? Well, she doesn't go by that name in this movie, but I digress. Not that having that name seems to have helped her that much, as her biggest credit, according to Letterboxd, is A Very Harold and Kumar Christmas. Did you even remember that there was a Harold and Kumar Christmas movie? I didn't. I only thought there were the two of those. Go to White Castle and Escape from Guantanamo Bay. Where was I? Oh, right. Alligator Alley. Stuff happens that's not super important. We learn Avery is vegan here, but to the film's credit, she's not the stereotypical kind, as she doesn't give any of her family grief about eating meat. She just refuses it when offered. The rival family enters the film at this point, and one of them is even carrying a banjo. How deliverance of them. The stereotypes are strong with this one. The CGI alligator makes its first appearance here, as the families argue over who has the right to be there, except for Avery and the younger of the 3 members of the royal family, who are politely waving to each other. Not hard to see where that's going. The alligator bites Avery's dad, with the camera focusing on it while an ominous music sting happens. They apparently kill it, but even if this one is dead, we know there will be more. Both from the plot summary and from the alternate title being a plural. We meet Avery's stepmother shortly after this. She is annoying, so I will only bring her up again if anything plot-relevant happens or she dies. While at a local bar, Avery and her dad see the guy I mentioned earlier, who was drinking blue stuff from a jar, burst in, yell that a gator ate his friend, and passed out. I'd assumed this guy had been eaten. The opening certainly implied as much, but here he is. Drunk and traumatized. Bad combination there, means the characters probably won't believe him until more people get eaten. There's a pretty funny joke between Avery and the family friend who's been perving on her throughout the movie. Well, I thought he was a family friend, but we'll get to that. It's basically a masturbation joke, but it works. A few more like these, I might end up putting this movie higher than Santa Jaws in the season wrap-up. Afterwards, we learn that Avery and the younger man from the rival family, Dashan, are already a thing. Another bad assumption on my part. I thought that would happen before the end of the movie, not before the movie took place. Slight point for subverting my expectations. The tender romantic moment is interrupted by the return of blue liquid drinking guy showing up to yell, "We all gonna die!" only to be impaled by the tail spikes of another mutated gator. The cock-blocking jerk. Avery tries to tell her family about the gator attack, but no one listens to her. In fact, her stepmother mocks her for referring to the gators as a threat based on Avery being a vegan. I've got to give the movie credit here. Having the vegan character be the first one to prioritize saving human lives from the mutant gators is the opposite of how most of these kinds of movies would handle it. In just about any other movie of this type, the vegan character would get eaten while trying to give the killer mutant animal a flower or something. Avery, at least, can tell the difference between cruelty in factory farming and self-defense. We learn here that the bad alcohol that was dumped earlier in the movie was made by the head of the rival family. He was one of the 3 people we met earlier, and they're called... I had to write this down phonetically because there was no way in fuck I was going to spell it. It's a southern thing. Robichaux. Avery's family is called the Doucettes, if you care. We follow his mute banjo-playing son, who seems quite good at it, by the way, or at least they are playing audio of someone who is quite good at it over the actor, just moving his fingers. I can't tell. Into the house, where we see the Robichaux's patriarch tasting blue liquid and spitting it out, saying it must be the chemicals he added to the moonshine formula, that he never should have messed with his father's recipe, and that this batch will need to be dumped too. So yeah, he's going to be dead before the movie's over. He's already damaged the ecosystem, resulting in 2 brutal deaths. He's not going to be able to get out of this movie with just a...
"Oopsie whoopsie, we did a fucky wucky."
We also learn the origin of the feud between the families. But it's dubious how true it is, but the guy making the mutant alligator creating moonshine seems to believe it, and thus has continued the rivalry well past its 100th year. Shortly after this, a deputy who is a member of Avery's family gets killed, but it's mostly her own dumb fault. I say mostly because while her car was stuck, she should have stayed in it. Granted, she had no way of knowing that the mutant gators could launch the spikes from their tails, but she got out of the car when she, a local, would have had to know she had no chance of outrunning them. My experience with the South was like a 4-day weekend in Atlanta. That barely counts. Of course, when she called for backup on her radio before getting out of the car, she only said 3 of them without specifying she meant gators. You can probably see what's coming after this. After the deputy dies, we cut back to Avery and her boyfriend, Dathan. I think I already mentioned that. Having spent all night hunting the mutant gators with no luck. Their boat has the misfortune to stop working right near where Dathan thinks the mutant gators might have set up a nest. A gator attacks their boat, but fortunately they were near enough to the shore to be spotted by members of the 2 families, who were all about an inch from killing each other. For the reasons you probably think, because of the deputy being needlessly vague over the radio. The conflict resolves super quick as the 2 family patriarchs both go into the water to try and get the gator to come for them, instead of going after Avery and Dathan. The Robichauds and Doucettes all fire their guns into the gator coming for them at once, killing it, but the victory and unity are both short-lived as the families find themselves being flanked by 2 other mutant gators. This is, well, exciting would be overstating it, but there's some degree of tension here, as several of the Doucettes present haven't been given names, so if anyone's likely to not come out of this scene alive, it's them. Avery and Dathan are able to get the boat running again and come to rescue their families. Most of them get out except for an older gentleman who gets dragged off by the gators just before a police boat arrives to save everyone who couldn't fit on Dathan's boat. The sheriff says he'll put out a bounty for the new large gators, with Avery saying that this is a new species, and as far as she knows it is, as I don't think she even knows about the moonshine, let alone it being dumped in the swamp, and they need to call in experts. Her father balks at this, but accedes to at least getting some sleep before going after the gators himself. Okay, sorry if my cadence suddenly seems off from this point forward, but I've had to let it get hot in here because leaving the window open, as I had been for the first 15 minutes or so of recording, once that's edited down, it's going to be less than that. The point is, the neighbors decided to get loud. For no apparent reason. They're just out there whooping and cheering over nothing. It's not a holiday. There's no sporting event that I'm aware of. Anyway, everything that I talked about up to this point in the movie, not the loud neighbors, it's just the first third of the movie. All of that, plus stuff that I've glossed over. We're still like 11 minutes away from the halfway point. You know, whatever else I can say about this movie, it certainly isn't boring. Avery's father, in the next scene, taking place at dinner, claims that the family feud has lasted for 200 years, and tells a story about as brutal as the one the Robichaud father had said. So yeah, odds are both family lores are full of shit. Avery's stepmother leaves the house to look for her dog. She sees one of the gators and screams, after finding the dog. The dog's okay at this point. The family comes running to her side. It turns out the guy who's been perving on Avery since her first scene in the movie is her stepmother's brother. She's been getting ogled by her step-uncle. So much stereotyping going on in this movie. Anyway, a darkly funny moment that would have been right at home in Lake Placid, the movie that I was afraid this one was going to rip off. Said step-uncle says he's going to create a distraction so they can get away, and then he proceeds to throw the dog that his sister had just gone to the trouble of finding to the gator. I shouldn't be laughing that the poor puppy in its cute camouflage sweater just became gator chow, but it's so sudden I just couldn't help it. Avery's father goes to the bathroom to wash his face, and he starts to notice the skin around where he'd been bitten the day before is turning green and scaly. Yep, it's going to be one of those movies. Naturally, he doesn't say anything to his family, because of the reason. We cut to an obvious knockoff of Steve Irwin called the Gator Whisperer. Even his logo looks the same. But this bit, which I think is supposed to be funny, seems like it was written by someone who only ever saw the commercials for Irwin's show. I'm not gonna lie, this feels a teeny bit offensive. The camera crew ends up getting eaten in a scene with some of the worst CGI of the whole movie to this point, and some unnecessary slow-mo, but Avery's father ends up saving Dathan's father from one gator, plus a number of mutant gator eggs get destroyed. Of course, we're only just at the halfway point finally, so there's obviously still some out there. Of course, everyone is dumb enough to think it's over, as we cut to a party where both families are gathered, and the two leads split the prize money offered by the parish. It's Louisiana, so I don't mean parish as in a church. Well, they would be splitting it if they didn't get drunk and engage in petty sniping. That truce lasted all of an afternoon. As the Doucettes escort the Robichaux out at gunpoint, turns out there are more than three of them. More than three Robichaux. Avery's father does exactly what you expected he was going to do once I mentioned the green scales around his hand. He starts to turn into an alligator. And apparently so has the stepmom's brother, as we see green eyes and scales around his face when he tries to aim his gun at Dashan while he and Avery are kissing. We didn't see him get bitten at any point, but we do find out later that this came as the result of him eating the meat from the first mutant gator that had got killed in the movie. In fact, all of the Doucettes were eating that meat except for Avery. You know, this is incredibly stupid, but also kind of awesome. I respect the movie for just leaning into this the way Santa Jaws just utterly failed to do. Anyway, the step-uncle's fingers, now claws, are used to slash the throat of the mute banjo-playing Robichaux brother, and he manages to bite Dathan himself. So, yeah, unless they find a cure, Avery is probably going to have to kill her own boyfriend. Sad, but at least this is being set up now and not being shoehorned in the last few minutes like some movies I can rant about and already did in the last episode. So after this traumatic incident, where Avery has just witnessed her step-uncle having green scaly skin and sharp teeth, and also murdering her boyfriend's brother, she and Dathan have sex, apparently, as we see them next waking up in his bed. Not the first time I've seen this kind of thing in a movie like this, so I'm not going to dwell on it. The sheriff goes over to the Doucette household and looks like he gets bitten by a gator who is hiding under the bed. Not hard to guess who that was. When he meets up with Avery and Dathan's father afterwards, he mentions that the entire Doucette family seems to have gone missing. This is more than like a dozen people, so that bodes very ill. The group minus the sheriff go gator hunting, and one attacks the boat. Avery comes to the conclusion that the gator attacking them is her stepmother because the gator's front claws are the same color as the stepmother's nail polish. I am not kidding about Avery's conclusion or about the claws. At some point, the group gets separated, and Avery falls into a quagmire, and as she sinks, she gets approached by a gator. As it roars and starts to head towards her, however, it gets attacked by another gator, and I think you can see where this is going. In case you need another hint, though, this gator has a gold tooth. And so did Avery's father. This is all quite silly. I think it was supposed to be touching, but I honestly just started chuckling when she called the gator Daddy, and the gator helped her out of the quagmire. After realizing that their dumped blue moonshine is what caused the mutations of the original gators, the surviving Robichaux decided to get rid of what they have left in a safe fashion. Sadly, this is when Dathan starts to turn, getting visibly weaker as he carries tanks to the truck. Avery returns just in time for both her and the Elder Robichaux to see Dathan turn into a gator right in front of them. Just standing there, not doing anything. Even though both of them are armed. And as far as they know, there's no cure. As far as the audience knows, there's no cure. And Avery had already killed several mutant gators earlier. Her Bond one-liner before blowing up a gas tank that they were near with a handgun was, "See you later." You know the rest. Not a great pre-kill line, but it's still way better than "Ho ho ho, you son of a fish." Anyway, Dathan Gator doesn't attack, so there's that at least. Another gator, who I think we can presume was the step-uncle, does show up, and the two fight. And this fight has no weight to it. And not just because both gators are CG, though that certainly doesn't help. The two gators end up killing each other, though the wounds only show up once there's humans in the frame with them. Or at least we're led to believe Dathan is dead, but as soon as Avery and the Elder Robichaux leave, the Dathan Gator starts moving again. Speaking of Avery and the Elder Robichaux, they bring the information about the moonshine creating the gators to the sheriff, who it turns out was lucky and only his pant leg got ripped during the attack earlier. And with two witnesses who have no real reason to like each other backing each other up, he believes them and announces he's going to get some more weapons. Avery reluctantly admits that even though most of these gators were once her family, they have a taste for human flesh and a clear aggression, so they don't really have much of a choice. There's what is basically a war sequence not long after this, but long story short, a bunch of Robichauxs are brought in to herd the Doucet's-turned gators into a building, the bar from earlier actually, rigged with explosives by the sheriff. I do have to include this part though. The Robichaux patriarch and the gator that was Avery's father have a Western-style showdown. The former with a shotgun and the latter with the spikes that can be launched from his tail. And I kid you not, the gator actually waits until the count of 3. Both end up dead, of course, but technically the gator won as the shotgun blast that took him out was fired off as a death reflex and just happened to hit the right spot. The sheriff ends up getting eaten before he could throw the grenade that would set off the rest of the explosives. The one black guy in the movie. Well, followed that trope to the letter, I see. Well, Avery ends up having to make a Molotov cocktail to finish the job. She's knocked backwards by the blast. While she's prone, the gator who had been Dathan shows up and drags her off. We flash forward to 1 year later. 1 year, that is exactly what the text said. And said Dathan Gator is in a pen, while Avery is selling a bunch of other gator skins to a dealer of some sort. So, guess not a vegan anymore? Yeah. Probably what I should have expected from this kind of movie. Anyway, the dealer she's talking to asks her for, quote, the big one over there, but she says he's not for sale. Then we hear baby noises. The baby looks fully human, but, I mean, we all know what the movie is implying here, right? I'm just going to leave you off before the random thoughts section with this image. Just leave this up in silence for a few seconds. Let the people really take it in. The image is labeled Yikes in the Dropbox folder. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. They actually had the mutated alligators have red around their necks. Makes one wonder why this had an alternate title at all, seeing as Ragin' Cajun Redneck Gators was pretty on the nose. There are more genuinely nice character moments in this movie than I would have expected going in. By which I mean any. Honestly, the thing that makes the classic monster movies as memorable as they were was that they actually gave you people you could root for, as opposed to most modern monster/killer animal movies where everyone but the designated survivor or survivors are such insufferable douchebags you can't wait to see them buy it. Actually, sometimes the designated survivors are kind of jerks too. I think I went off on a rant about that kind of thing before on this show, so I'll just move on to the next thought. So at one point, we're supposed to believe that the mutant gators were able to bite off someone's head while leaving the body leaned up against a tree, then just spit the head out somewhere. The only reason for this is so the Robichaux could be blamed for the deputy's death. Either the gators knew about the ancient family feud and manipulated it to their advantage, or this is bad writing. The obvious edits where the commercial breaks were supposed to go are back and as distracting as ever. Jordan Danger, Jordan Hinson in this movie, looks like she's the actress you hire if you want Alexis Bledel, but she either has a scheduling conflict or is asking for too much money. What does it say about me that I was only somewhat fazed by the ending? Not that it had no effect on me at all, but it was closer to what than ew. In fact, as the time between when I watched the movie and when I recorded this audio passed, I found myself being less and less bothered by this at all. I might even go so far as to say I'm okay with it. Not that I want to see how it all happened, mind you, I'm just saying I'm not gonna judge. The mutant gator does seem to be sapient after all. He had enough presence of mind to be able to use his teeth to pull someone away from a burning building without injuring them. You know, part of me wonders if one of the reasons that this just didn't really bug me that much is because literally less than a week before watching this movie, I had just finished the first of Chuck Tingle's 2-book series about trans wizard Harriet Porber, the first book being Harriet Porber and the Bad Boy Parasaurolophus. And, okay, I'm going to get a little graphic here, but my channel's not monetized anyway. The first sex scene of the movie book features the anthropomorphic dinosaur Snape receiving oral, and he is a trans male, so his, the book is actually vague if it was a surgically created penis or a strap-on, but anyway, the point is I'm pretty sure reading that book just already primed my brain to sort of accept the general idea of reptile on human relations. That's all I'm getting at. And now it's time for today's cool shark fact. Well, alligator fact for this one, I guess. I'll throw in a shark fact in the season wrap-up episode to make up for it. Thanks to a special blood vessel, the second aorta is what it's called, alligators are able to shunt blood away from their lungs and towards their stomach, stimulating the production of strong stomach acids to break down their meals faster. This is necessary as juvenile alligators are capable of eating about 23% of their body weight in a sitting, which is equivalent to a 180-pound person eating more than 41 pounds of steak. Final verdict. You know, I went into this movie worried that it was going to be a ripoff of Lake Placid. It wasn't, which is good. It has a vegan character who is not only not an obnoxious stereotype, but is actually the lead, which is also nice. Implications of the ending aside. And a few of the intentionally funny moments land, though fewer than I think the filmmakers intended. I can't say I loved this movie, but I certainly didn't hate it. And I wasn't bored. So yeah, I'm thinking top half of the rankings for this one when we get to the season wrap-up. In probably just a few weeks. It's not going to be number one. The reason behind the mutation pushes way past the limits of suspension of disbelief, and the makeup job for the humans who mutate probably would have looked amazing in the 1990s, but this movie was made in 2013. And literally the only black character dies. All of that is enough to keep it from the top spot. Honestly, I'm going to go ahead and give you a minor spoiler here. It's keeping it out of the number 2 spot too, but only just barely. Anyway, this is definitely a turn off your brain kind of movie, though I think even then, you'll still find yourself going, wait, more than once. Have fun. Stay safe.